Welcome to Power Lunch Live. I'm Rhett Power, your host. It's good to be with you here. I'm on the road this week. I'm actually in California doing this from beautiful San Diego. But I can't wait to get back to my office, back home, and out of COVID danger. Anyway, it's good to be with you. It's good to be back here. The point of Power Lunch Live is to have today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, people who are doing amazing work in the world that we can all learn from so that we can get better at whatever it is we do. Now, the fun part about the program is that it can be and should be interactive. What that means, though, is that you've got to get on that keyboard or on your phone and type us a message, type us a question so that we can get to the answers and the things that you want to learn about. Now, please like or share the program if you appreciate what we do, so that your network can benefit. You know, if you like or share it, your network might see it and also benefit. So that's a great thing. Today, I'm real pleased to have a colleague in the MG100, Marshall Goldsmith 100 program. I've got Dr. David Cohen. David is somebody I'm really excited to talk to. He's a thought leader on corporate and culture behavior. He is the founder of DS Cohen and Associates. He's a frequent keynote speaker on talent management and human resources. He teaches at, I am going to absolutely miss this name but he teaches at York University. Is it Schulich?
Schulich. You got it. Perfect.
Schulich. All right. Schulich School of Business and Durham College. He's authored 2 books, The Talent Edge, a behavioral approach to hiring and developing and keeping top performers. And that was a John Wiley and Sons book. And then also Inside the Box, leading with corporate values to drive sustained business success. And that was a Jossey-Bass book. But and I know, David, you're working on a new book, but welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Well, happy birthday. I know it's your birthday. And
thank you very much.
I won't make a big deal out of it. I won't sing for you.
No, please don't. Because if you think I'll sing back and then everybody will leave.
Oh yeah, that'd be counterproductive, right? Counterproductive.
Right.
So, you know, we've talked a lot over the last couple of months, and I wanted to sort of pick your brain today on COVID and culture, HR, a bunch of different topics, but. I wanted to get your thought on this. If you had to give sort of the corporate world a collective grade on how they've done during COVID, what would that be? The teacher in you.
Well, it really depends on my students. You see, there's a range. There are some that would get an A+, like Ingelheim Boehringer or Starbucks. There's some that would get a B- C, and there's some, I would unfortunately say the majority, who outright failed. And that is because when I look at what they do, again, from a values point of view, which is the foundation for their culture, they didn't always live up to their belief systems. And they didn't necessarily treat, a lot of people were very worried, leaders were worried about the short term. And so they put a lot of pressure on people to get results done, which turned into micromanaging where it never existed before. I talked to a couple of places like that. And then there's the others that said, listen, this is a crisis. We believe in our people and we want you to be whole. We realize there's extenuating circumstances with family, parents, kids, etc. And so we're going to keep you whole to the end of the year. And so we're not going to fire anybody. Everybody's safe until December 31st, and then we'll reevaluate. And those organizations, I think, have lived their values and they've motivated their employees, and their employees are very proud. There's a great deal. Their employee experience is really positive. I know a lot of companies that have put together employee engagement activities, fun lunches, scavenger hunts, etc. Those are fun, but if you're still being micromanaged, your experience is lousy. So your engagement is momentary. So I really think it depends on the leadership of the organization, what kind of grade they get.
What is, do you think COVID has and will sort of forever change HR and the way we think of it? I mean, you're so tied into this community. What are you hearing from HR heads of HR and other things? Has there been a big shift? Has there been a rethinking of what and what the job of HR is during something like a COVID?
Yeah, I think that from some of the people I talked to, some of the senior CHROs and other senior leaders in HR have actually, for the first time, gone out of their way and are having small group meetings with frontline staff. They haven't talked to frontline staff probably in years. And so they're getting a better handle on what's going on and how people feel about the way that they're treated by management and others. So I think that it's connected. It made some HR leaders more aware that they have to be more connected with the people on the front line. I hope that lasts beyond whenever this is over. I also believe that some of the leaders I talked to found that because of this crisis, they found it more comfortable holding leadership's feet to the fire for keeping certain promises. So they've had the courage to speak up where they perhaps didn't speak up before. So I think that there's some good things that have happened from an HR point of view. I think that a lot of that should continue to maintain that. So I'm hopeful that HR will be more empathetic, more aware, and change their image of either being like an auditor that comes by to make sure things are done, or a place to fill out forms. So put the people back in people business.
It seems. I think you're right. I mean, it seems to me that we're in this place where, HR should be elevated, right? Where you're right. It's not just a place to come fill out forms, but it's a place to come, because I think a lot of companies now are going to have to deal with things like mental health even more, right? How do you deal with, we'll get into this in a few minutes, but like, HR might need to be at the table when you just start talking about KPIs and expectations, right?
Right.
When we're talking about remote workforces now, I think, HR has got to be at the table. It just seems like to me, it's elevated the role of HR in a way that may be unlike anything else.
It's made HR, it's put HR on the hot seat, so to speak, that they have to become the voice of the employees. And they have to have the courage to speak up. And that if they get comfortable with that and they deliver a positive benefit for employees, I think it'll have a very positive long-term effect on who is HR and why it is needed as a business partner. Because there's always that question that was asked around 20 years ago, or the article that was in Fast Company 20 something years ago that said why we hate HR. And or that was the title. And I think this might lead to a new article on why we love HR, because HR needs to understand, and they, in theory, they talk about the whole person, not only the work that they do, but the mental, emotional health of that person. And they've always had EA and employee assistance programs, but they never really necessarily push those or had people pay attention to them. And I think now HR has really got to step up and say, I got to worry about the whole person. And when they find out they're being micromanaged or they're being underserved, they got to bring that to the attention of the person's manager.
Do you think you sort of the same question that I asked about HR? Do you think, organizational development departments for OD and other areas like that, is it time to sort of rethink how all that's structured?
Oh yeah, I've been saying that for years. I mean, they're all these departments kind of work in their own silos often, and they're not integrated. So therefore, they go off and do things which sound good in theory for them, but then all of a sudden they find out that in recruiting they were doing something counter to that, or in leadership development they're doing something different than they were doing in OD. And I think that, hopefully this will say we got to integrate. We're all in this together with the same vision of helping employees. So I think that if it can get people to open up and talk more to each other within the HR department and the OD department, it'll really be helpful to move forward. But
does that all fit under human resources? Where does that all fit? Like,
well, that's the problem. I know that, a lot of organizations divide these into different departments. And while they fit under the CHRO, the recruiting group doesn't necessarily ever talk to the leadership development group. And the succession planning people don't talk to the recruiting people. And so they're off recruiting somebody when there's somebody in the organization that leadership development or succession planning can say, hey, that person should get the role, or that person's a better candidate. And then for whatever reason, they think an outside person's better. And even if the manager thinks an outside person's better, that succession planning group or somebody else has to speak up and say, hey, we got these internal candidates, and we know from the research that an internal promotion is significantly long-term more successful than somebody hired from the outside, especially when you're talking about senior positions. So hopefully it'll start to open that up, because there's a hiring freeze in a lot of organizations. And so if they need an opening, hopefully they'll start looking internally and they'll start communicating better about their own areas of work.
You've done a lot of work around, retention and recruiting. And
True.
I mean, I think today, we were talking a little bit before we came on about interviewing today and recruiting today. So I want to talk a little bit about that. How do you, in this day and age right now and where we are, how do you retain and recruit? I mean, it just, to me, is, we were talking about video interviewing, and I found that fascinating that you're talking about some of the biases that you're seeing in video recruiting. What is, this is something that everybody's going to face, right? We're going to, before people start going back to work or things change significantly, we're talking about late first quarter, second quarter next year. So another 4 or 5 months of this. So you're going to have to hire and retain, and you're going to have these conversations. How do you do it right now? And it's just, to me, this is a challenge. It's a real challenge.
Yeah, this is a major challenge. And unfortunately, in looking at some of the articles and some of the things I've read online, I think people misunderstand the whole thing of virtual interviewing, using video apps for interviewing. I was reading one place where one person said it reduces bias, but it doesn't reduce bias. It actually creates a new kind of bias. The research on that, the academic research over the years, is quite interesting. It says it depends on everything from the person's web speed connection to the lighting the person might have, to how the person presents themselves, which is usually like this, a headshot, which means all of their nervous tics and everything else are hidden, and you're not going to know that. I deal with one client that for the last 10 years, because they're located in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, they've been doing video interviews for the first and second round for years. And when the person shows up, they say part of the problem is people just don't know or have not seen or been able to hide some of the idiosyncrasies they have that if it was an in-person interview, they would not. So there are new kinds of biases that come up in video interviewing. There's also, so to me, it really depends on the organization. and how they go about it. But what organizations have to realize is that interview, the person is judging the interviewer as well as being judged by the interviewer. And that is a two-way evaluation. But it is also your onboarding experience. It's a message on how am I going to be treated when I get there. I was just talking with one very senior person who applied for one of the major companies in the world. Say it's in the top 10 from bottom line results. And when she got to the final interview, it was a video interview with 7 people on the other side. And she was overwhelmed. Now, I never recommend that you have more than 3 people in a panel interview. Panel interviews are more effective. Panel interviews do reduce bias. But 7 people, she's looking on the screen at 7 different people. It was kind of like she was watching a tennis match. She didn't know where the next question's coming from. Plus, in fact, she was a little worried that if she gets this job, or all 7 of these people, because they were all in management positions, she's going to have a dotted line relationship with all of them. And she'll never meet any of them the first 6 months. So the first issue is, what are the kinds of questions you're asking that are relevant? You don't ask, how many golf balls fit in a 72-seat bus anymore. You don't ask those kinds of questions. You got to ask questions about, does this person recently and frequently demonstrate the values of our organization, of our culture? Because while there's a misconception that might lead to, hiring in one image, no, many different people from many parts of the world and religions can have similar behaviors. So it's not about hiring in my own image. It's about hiring people that I can trust. When decisions are made, they're going to make them in a way that's similar to mine. Plus the fact that go on.
No. How do you get to those? I mean, how do you? So that, I think that's a really, really important takeaway for people. I mean, it's about asking different questions than you might be able to do face to face, but or maybe not. But I like this idea that you've got to ask questions based on values, right?
Right. True. And those values. In that lies a problem, because organizations, I often say, have 2 sets of values. They have the value on their website and the value on their boardroom, which is great wall decor. And everybody in the organization sort of scoffs when they look at them because nobody lives that way. So they have an overt set of values. And then there's a covert set of values, which is not really talked about, but those are the ways people have really become successful. So organizations have to take the time and say, are these the values that really lead to success? Are these things that are just nice, or some consultant came in and helped us develop, or we copied them from a organization we're jealous of, so we put them up there? Because that's like promising a rose garden, but when the employee gets there, he finds out it's all thorns, because that's not the way anybody behaves. So you really have to, first of all, identify what your values are, and not the word, but the behavior. And then develop true behavioral questions that get the person engaged in a conversation, a dialogue on how did they act in a variety of situations, which would give you an opportunity to understand, have they behaved in alignment with the values you're looking for, the behaviors you're looking for.
No, that's not easy. If I'm an HR director right now, or a senior manager, and I'm looking, we're going through planning for 2021. I know that the economy is going to pick up probably second or third quarter next year. How do I retain people? Because I think one of the challenges that we're going to face is the job market's going to open back up. There's going to be opportunities for people to make moves. How do you keep people now?
Well, first of all, I want to bust the myth. People are moving now.
Fair enough.
How many people I'm connected with on LinkedIn that I got a pop up that says that they move companies, And I write to him and said, how is moving in the middle of a pandemic? How are you learning about the culture of the organization when it's all virtual? And there's lots of different ways of doing that. And then I have one client, one CEO that's really worried about, he's in the real estate business. He says, how do we teach them the culture when they don't meet anybody? And so, first of all, you need to have what I call corporate legends. What are those stories that people are really proud of that exemplify doing the right thing in a crisis? And it can be from any level of the organization. It doesn't have to be just senior management. And share those stories and talk about what are the actions that people took in those stories that made it successful. And then you begin to understand what it is. And one thing that I think that if I want to right now hold on to my staff, and I've said this at sessions that we've done with leaders in many different locations, is you've got to make sure that when the manager calls an employee, they don't ask the question, how are you doing? Because people, that's that throwaway question. It's like when my father used to go to a restaurant and the server used to come over and say, how's the food? My father would say, it's terrible, even if it was good. And they like all of a sudden go into, shock. And my father would say to him, well, if you didn't want to know the answer, don't ask the question. And so, we always answer politely, how are things going? They're going okay. Under the circumstances, they're going okay. So they got to change that question to, what can I do to help you right now? What's going on in your life that if it was alleviated, I can help you, and then take action. So if a person says, I'm really struggling because I got low dial-up internet speed here, but I could get a fiber optic and have no problem, but it costs too much money for me. So the company gets fiber optic. And the person is like thrilled because they might have their wife, their husband, the husband, and 3 children all on the internet at the same time. And it slows down even with fiber optic. So there's a lot of things that can be, or, I'm really struggling because my mother's in the hospital because she has COVID or whatever it might be. And they say, well, under those circumstances, why don't you take the 2 weeks off with pay, no problem. The rest of the team will chip in and help you out. And then you're going to find out if you do that extra step for them, they'll be loyal forever. And does it cost you that much? No, it costs you significantly more to hire a new employee when it clears up. Because what people don't realize, to replace an employee under the best of conditions, an entry-level employee is 1.5 times salary. A specialist is 3 times salary. A middle manager is 5 times salary. And you don't even want to know about executives. But the reality is, what's it cost you to get a fiber optic for this employee and make them loyal forever versus spending thousands of dollars looking for a new employee when it's over and they said, well, I let my manager know I needed help. They asked, but they never responded. So I was working with one of the firms out in California on this, and they came to, I asked them, so what do you got to do? What has to happen? They asked employees, and they came up with, if one of the HR managers have to get involved in this. HR managers, and all of the HR, OD, everybody should be calling employees and saying, how's it going? What was the last conversation with your manager like? And because they were finding out they were micromanaging them because they were under so much pressure to get things done. And they never micromanaged when they were in person. And so their conclusion was they were going to have a meeting with that person's supervisor and the supervisor's manager. So the one-up manager was going to get involved in this so the action can be corrected. I think that if you go out of your way to do something small, something simple, not have coffee meetings or not have scavenger hunts at home or whatever it is, but have something meaningful that addresses that person's response to you. I'm in trouble. I need help. I feel my grandson is 15. He's a sophomore in high school. And I thought he was going to go off the walls until high school opened. He's back in high school in this hybrid mode. It's he's a different person. He's back to himself. If you got teenagers at home, it's difficult. It's really hard. So how do you handle that? Parents have not been around that much. They've gotten to know their kids better than they ever knew them before. But now they're concerned. You got to alleviate that concern. I think if you do that, retention's not a problem. Teaching the culture of your organization to a new hire that's working remotely, that's a conundrum that needs to be answered.
I loved how you talked about that, though, about how, I was thinking back to my own company, what I have done to onboard people during this time. And it seems to me it really would have behooved me to get heavily involved in that and trying to share that culture, right? As the CEO and founder, I know the story. I know why we did it. I know why we did what we did. And I think that would have been a really important element for new people to know and understand. And
they hear it from you, and you can give a story on how you lived it, or how somebody who violated that, the consequences of that person, they'll get to understand it. And then you have to have that reinforced by their manager, who also tells a story, their own story, because when the senior person says it, that's nice, but people are skeptical. That's the senior person. That's what they're supposed to say. When their manager demonstrates it, when their manager lives it, they're more likely not only to believe it, but act that way. So one of the things you can, as a senior leader, is ask your management. So how have they, if you went to talk to their direct reports, what will their direct reports say about how they're transmitting the culture and the values of the organization? How are they transmitting that motivational factor to them? And they look at you and say, I've never done that. Then you say, well, we got a problem, because I'm going to ask you again next time we have a meeting. And I learned a long time ago from one of my clients who is a high school dropout and became the chief operating officer for one of North America's major supermarket chains. His mantra was, you can only expect that which you inspect. And so if you start asking it, they're going to expect you to be asking it again. And as soon as you ask it again, they know you're serious. They were going to start doing something about it.
Yeah. What is, how do we set expectations for people working remotely right now? I mean, we're going into the planning season. Yes. What is fair and what is right? I mean, should we expect the same level of productivity? Should we set the same goals that we've always set for people? What is right? What's wrong? What's fair? How do you even navigate that? And I mean, I know we have a lot more data than we had 8 months ago, but I don't know we haven't been in normal times. And so I think even when we go back to work next year and go back to whatever normal looks like, and I think some of that will happen. I don't think everybody's going to go completely remote, but how do you, I think we're not going to have the same level of productivity that we've had the last 8 months when this shakes out, right?
A lot of people are right now thinking that they want to go back to work physically, because working at home, they find that they're working many more hours than they did before. And so they're kind of missing, they're kind of work sick instead of homesick. And they need a break. I think it really depends. I think one of the problems is that employees don't understand their contribution to the greater good for that purpose of the company. And I think that managers have to share with them what is the objective in their work area? What's the purpose? How does that tie in to the strategic plan success and move them closer to the purpose, the vision of the organization? And I think that, you, instead of imposing on them goals, that you give them the opportunity to choose the goals that are going to make a contribution. They know what their goals have been over the years. They know what the range is. And you say to them, listen, you know that you have to do A, B, C, and D. We have to hit certain numbers. Here's why. Now, what can you do to contribute to that? And then you share that at a virtual team meeting, what each person's contribution will be, so they actually help each other out. That they say, well, I can help you with that, or I need help in this area. So they expand that knowledge, because you think of it from a human psychological point of view. If my boss gave me the goal and then there were obstacles or excuses I can make, I play the blame game and my boss accepts it. But if I'm the one that committed to it, all right, I'm the one who's going to follow through on it. I can't blame anybody else. I can't make excuses. I need to talk with my boss. And then you get into what, is commonly called feed forward. So instead of catching people doing something wrong, you set up, let's say that you have to achieve an increase in sales by the end of the year, what percent it is. You need to say to the person, okay, over the next 3 months, what are you going to do that by the end of the year, you'll be there? And then in 3 months, you review that with the person and find out, are they there at that milestone? And if not, why not? And then you ask, what can I do to help? Same thing as the question before, but because we were in this situation of working from home, because there are many avenues or possibilities of interference, being a parent that had to move in the house that was never there, a child who's having a hard time because they're doing virtual schooling, whatever it might be, you also have to understand that requires a modification of that person's goals. And somebody else on the team is going to have to pick that up, or you're going to have to find another way of picking that up. Because if you hear that person's in crisis and you say, well, everybody's got to, do more with less, and we got to increase this, it's too bad. That person's got their resume out there real quick. And as we said before, companies are looking, companies are hiring. And if you put a freeze on hiring, I think you're going to be finding that your staff is left and you're way behind. Because I talked to a couple of firms that have a freeze on hiring, and I said, they're in the IT business. I said, right now I know other firms that are looking to hire your people away. And you got a freeze on hiring, you might lose a lot of staff because senior management is not living the values right now. So the head of HR, I thought she was going to take action, but she changed jobs and went to a different company. Surprised me.
Of course. To your point, right?
So as long as she took that knowledge to the new company, she's okay.
I mean, it's funny that we're laughing about that, but it's true, because I think that, you look at all the social justice issues that we've gone through in the last, year, put COVID on top of that. And I think that people, it's just so much more apparent today when a company is not living their values and leadership is not living their values. And I think people there's just this expectation today. And because people have options, if a company's not living it, you're going to pay a price. I mean, you're just going to pay a price, and your customers are going to see it. Your employees are going to see it. And I mean, I know that I make decisions now where I spend my money. If there's something a CEO does that I disagree with wholeheartedly, I'm really a lot less inclined to spend money with that company, because I have choice.
Yeah, you not only have choices, leadership is under a microscope.
Yeah.
Because if you say your values are X, and the leaders to be expedient in making a decision or meeting a goal says, well, under these conditions, we've got to do Y, then it's not a value. And your employees catch on pretty quick. And so you've got to realize that you're being watched all the time. I had one senior leader who made a decision that upset a lot of his employees, but he put out the values as aspirational, justifying, therefore, since we're not there yet, we can still make this decision. It's something we're moving to. And I said, as soon as you put them under the name values and you put behaviors with those values, they're no longer aspirational. They're reality. And if you don't live them, you're going to create a lot of cynical employees. And therefore, quality goes down, customer service goes down. And there's a big reflection out there that is not going to be healthy. Yeah, you're right. I think senior leaders right now have to be aware of what they say and what they do. People are more aware of than ever.
I want to go back to the remote work for just a second. There's something that I was thinking about that I didn't ask. Is it fair to expect the same? We know people want to come back to work. We know people want to get out of the house to a large degree. There are going to be a lot of people that do want to stay and have enjoyed this new sort of way to work. But is it fair to expect the same results from people at home?
Oh, God, that goes back to the whole issue of what that person's living through. And it also depends on the industry. I mean, in customer service, yeah, when I call, one of the banks here has all 7,000 of the customer service people working from home. One of the largest cell phone providers also has their customer, and they both have decided they're not going back to work. They're not physically going back to work. So this is permanent. So they have to be able to say to them, what are the expectations? Is it fair? What if you're dealing with a customer that uses this to get upset, calls up about their mobile phone and then starts raving and ranting about the conditions they're in, and you hang up on them because you've got a 90-second time limit. So do we expect the same level of customer service from a speed point of view? I think they have to rethink things as to what do we expect from employees given what their roles are and the working conditions they're under. And so in some cases, yeah, we can expect the same. In other cases, we can expect different. It might be less by comparison, but different reasonable outcomes. Collectively, they have to add up to what we expect collectively. So it's about juggling your resources and your people so they kind of line up. It's not a simple answer.
No, I know it wasn't. I knew it wasn't a real fair question, but it's an interesting. It's a starting point. I think a lot of people need. It's a question I think a lot of people need to ask themselves, so that those other follow-up questions come, right? Like
right.
What? Because I think that is something that a lot of people are going to struggle with. What is fair? What is? We have this 8 months of data of people working from home, but is that truly what over the long term we should expect? I don't think so.
So they have to be careful about two things. One, people have to understand the difference between fair and equitable. What's fair for one person is not fair for another. So there's always that cartoon I liked where everybody's standing behind the fence at a baseball game and everybody's on a stool that's the same height. So the person's 4 foot versus the person's 6 foot. The 4 foot person still can't see the game. All right. But it's equitable. Fair is the 4 foot person's on a much taller stand than the tall guy. So now it becomes, an ability for everybody to watch the game. So you got to be able to understand, what are the needs of the individual. One of the things that I think would be very positive is for them to ask, just ask your team. Like, if so-and-so's having a hard time, what can you do to help them out? So when you're having a hard time, they help you out. And, don't go to a consultant. I need to work, but don't go to a consultant. Go to your employees and, sort of find out from them. What do they want? Let it be their decision so they feel good about what's happening to them. Don't impose it on them.
I mean, this almost to me speaks of rethinking again, going back to that HR question HR that we were talking about before. I mean, you really almost rethinking benefits packages and how we look at benefits, right? And what all that means, and having this different view of what, because I might take a pay cut to work from home, right?
Some people have.
Right. If I'm not spending money on gas and transportation every day and lunch when I'm in town at the office and all of some of these other expenses, maybe that works for me. Right.
Right. Some people have said, listen, the company's in trouble. We might not make plan, but I love my job. I love the company, but my expenses have been down. So therefore, reduce my salary by 5% or 10%.
Right.
So, there's a whole new world out there that has to be reconsidered because the remote working is not going to go away. And what this COVID has done, a lot of organizations have struggled with remote working, so they've been reluctant. Some organizations embraced it a long time ago, but most organizations have not. COVID has accelerated this at least 10 years. We're now thinking about things that probably would take another 10 years to think about from a remote working perspective. That has changed the whole nature between employer and employee, which changes the whole nature of, as you said, benefits, compensation, promotion, mobility. I mean, I know some people that are working on the East Coast. I know one couple that moved to California, moved to Arizona, right? Because it doesn't matter physically where I'm working, just as long as I have access to, my high-speed internet, I'm fine. And I've always wanted to move to Arizona because I don't like the winter. So move to Arizona.
My godson, he just graduated from school, took a job 2 years ago with a major financial institution. They've gone completely remote. So he's 24, or 23. He's roaming around the U.S., from his car, staying with friends, but doing his job every day, right? My teenage son, his first summer job was a remote job this past summer, which blows my mind.
Can't do newspapers that way, though.
As a whole new take on the newspaper delivery thing, but it is fascinating, and I think it, particularly for those, we were talking about teenagers a little while ago, and for young people, it is a whole new. I mean, just to me, it's fascinating. If I could have picked where I wanted to live when I was 22 and done my job from anywhere I wanted to in the world, wow, that's mind blowing.
Yeah, that would be mind blowing, because it's kind of like, especially when you're 22 and have no responsibilities except paying off your college loan. You can do things that you never dreamt of doing, because as far as the person knows, there are commercials on TV about how people are driving out in their car and taking a swim and realize there's a meeting, and he runs back, puts a shirt on, he's sitting in the car, and they say, how was lunch? And he says it was invigorating.
Yeah, but if I don't have to live in Manhattan, right, and spend $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 a month on living in the city, right?
It's more than that.
Yeah, a lot more than that. That's living with some roommates. I mean, that's a phenomenal standard of living that you could have. I mean, to me, it's fascinating. So, final question: what are you excited about? What are you looking out on the horizon, looking out ahead? What are you really excited about with all this change? And what are you keeping an eye on? I know you're working on the book, on revising the book, and working on some new research. And what scares you?
What scares me that organizations will accept more employees without being sensitive to that employee's need, without being sensitive to that employee's situation. They're working at home. Of course, they don't see them. So they'll project, managers will project, if this is my situation at home and everything's good because I'm an empty nester, yada, yada, that they're going to project that on other people, whether they have parents there or kids there, et cetera. So I'm really concerned that a lot of employees might get overwhelmed and burn out, and that there's going to be a lot of mental illness created as a result of that. What I'm excited about is that organizations have an opportunity to rethink the nature of work, everything from standard operating procedures to how decisions are made, to pushing decisions down to the lowest possible level. And also what we talked about before, I think it is going to heighten the importance of leadership, living the values. So I hope that they'll find out what the covert values are and move the covert values to the overt values, because when they're one and the same, you have a healthy organization. So I hope that people take a deep dive and say, is this the image we really want? I know that one company, I was talking to the CHRO of Home Depot Canada, and they're living it. They're doing it. They're really living the values. And it's great. She's very proud of it. And I've known her, for a long time, and she's been at like 4 or 5 different companies. She said this is the first company she's worked on in that the values are authentic. They're real. And she's really proud of working as a result. And she sees it. She sees it in the employees. So hopefully that will be what happens or doesn't happen.
Well, David, thank you so much. Dr. David Cohen.
Thank you very much.
Pick up his book, the latest 2 books, The Talent Edge, a behavioral approach to hiring, developing, and keeping top performers, and Inside the Box, leading with corporate values to drive sustained business success. We have to have you back on, David, so we can talk about the books and the new research and the new work. We didn't even get to that, but I do want to have you back on so we can talk about that. Thank you. Thank you for spending some time with us here on Power Lunch Live. You can look at the upcoming schedule at powerlunch.live for our next few shows. Again, David, thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You guys have a great day. We will see you next week. I am traveling more, so we are not going to have a program. But next week, we will be back on the air and for a couple of days. Then we have Thanksgiving. But we'll see you next week. You guys have a great day.